All right, let's take our Bibles and go to the book of Job, chapter 1. Job, chapter 1. Thank you, Pastor, for sharing those things with us. Good reminders of what our church is and what it ought to continue to be in the days ahead. Job, chapter 1. Verse number 1, there was a man in the land of Uz whose name was Job, and that man was perfect and upright, and one that feared God and eschewed evil. There were born unto him 7 sons and 3 daughters. His substance also was 7,000 sheep and 3,000 camels and 500 yoke of oxen and 500 she-asses, and a very great household, so that this man was the greatest of all the men of the east. And his sons went and feasted in their houses, every one his day, and sent and called for their 3 sisters to eat and to drink with them. And it was so, when the days of their feasting were gone about, that Job sent and sanctified them, and rose up early in the morning, and offered burnt offerings according to the number of them all. For Job said, it may be that my sons have sinned, and cursed God in their hearts. Thus Job did continually. The devil seems to be hitting a lot of home runs against Christians these days. It seems like the devil is always up to bat. And sometimes in our lives, it's hard to get him out. He seems to be able to barrel up the ball and take it out of the park. But I want you to realize that the devil is not invincible. The outlook wasn't brilliant for the Mudville 9 that day. The score stood 4-2 with but 1 inning yet to play. And then when Cooney died at first and Barrows did the same, a sickly silence fell upon the patrons of the game. A struggling few got up to go in deep despair. The rest clung to that hope which springs eternal in the human heart somewhere. They thought if only Casey could get a whack at that, they'd put up even money now with Casey at the bat. But Flynn preceded Casey, and so did Jimmy Blake. The former was a Lulu, and the latter was a cake. So upon that stricken multitude grim melancholy sat, for there seemed but little chance of Casey's getting to the bat. But Flynn let drive a single, to the wonderment of all, and Blake, the much despised, tore the cover off the ball. And when the dust had lifted and the men saw what had occurred, there was Jimmy safe at second and Flynn a hugging third. Then from 5,000 throats and more there rose a lusty yell. It rumbled through the valley, it rattled in the dell. It knocked upon the mountain and recoiled upon the flat, for Casey, mighty Casey, was advancing to the bat. There was ease in Casey's manner as he stepped into his place. There was pride in Casey's bearing and a smile on Casey's face. And when responding to the cheers, he lightly doffed his cap. No stranger in the crowd could doubt 'twas Casey at the bat. 10,000 eyes were on him as he rubbed his hands with dirt. 5,000 tongues applauded when he wiped them on his shirt. Then while the writhing pitcher ground the ball into his hip, defiance gleamed in Casey's eye. A snarl curled Casey's lip. And now the leather-covered sphere came hurtling through the air, and Casey stood a-watching it in a haughty grandeur there. Close by the sturdy batsman the ball unheeded sped. "Ain't my style," said Casey. "Strike one," the umpire said. From the benches black with people, there went up a muffled roar, like the beating of storm waves on a stern and distant shore. "Kill him! Kill the umpire!" shouted someone in the stand. And it's likely they had killed him had not Casey raised his hand. With a smile of Christian charity, great Casey's visage shone. He stilled the rising tumult He bade the game go on. He signaled to the pitcher, and once more the thyroid flew, but Casey still ignored it, and the umpire said, "Strike two." "Fraud!" cried the Madden thousands, and echo answered, "Fraud!" But one scornful look from Casey, and the audience was awed. They saw his face grow stern and cold. They saw his muscles strain. They knew that Casey would not let that ball go by again. The sneer now gone from Casey's lip. His teeth are clenched with hate. He pounds with cruel violence his bat upon the plate. And now the pitcher holds the ball, and now he lets it go, and now the air is shattered by the force of Casey's blow. Oh, somewhere in this favored land, the sun is shining bright. The band is playing somewhere, and somewhere hearts are light. And somewhere men are laughing, and somewhere children shout. But there's no joy in Mudville, for mighty Casey has struck out. You know, at times, Satan steps into the batter's box of our life, and it seems that it's impossible to strike him out. But I want you to see in our passage tonight that Satan struck out against this man named Job. Why did he strike out? Because greater is he that's in you than he that's in the world. The Bible says we're to submit ourselves unto the Lord. Resist the devil, and he will flee from you. Now, Satan always seems to be up to bat in the most crucial moments of our life. So how do we strike him out? How can we be victorious? What is the pitch that we can throw to get Satan off of our back? Well, I want you to look at a recap of Job's life. And we see in his life three critical at-bats that we can learn from. First, in chapter 1, we see that Job was a person of excellence. You know, the back of Job's baseball card was pretty impressive. He was a Cy Young award-winning pitcher on the mound here against Satan. We see that he was a spiritual person. In verse number 1, the Bible says he was perfect, and that word carries the idea of being complete. He was mature. He was perfect and upright, one that feared God and eschewed evil. You know, victory against Satan never starts with outward performance. It always starts with inward preparation. And here was a man that feared God. Here was a man that eschewed evil. Here was a man that was growing in his spiritual maturity for Christ. The Bible tells us in 1 Timothy 4 and verse 7, exercise thyself rather unto godliness. For bodily exercise profiteth little, or for a little time, but godliness is profitable unto all things. In fact, in verse number 5, it told us that Job would rise up early in the morning and offer sacrifices according to the number of his children, just in case they had sinned. He wanted to make sure that he was always right with God. Here was a spiritual person, and he had a successful portfolio. We see in verse number 2 that he had a large family, 7 sons, 3 daughters. We see in verse 3 that he had some wonderful finances in his life. His substance was 7,000 sheep, 3,000 camels, 500 yoke of oxen, 500 she-asses, a very great household. This was a man of great wealth. He had a successful portfolio. In fact, the Bible tells us here in verse 3 that he had a number 1 ranking in the East. He was the greatest man in the East. And by the way, don't forget, all of that blessing comes from God. It's not our doing when God blesses, for a man can receive nothing except it be given him from heaven. But we see, thirdly, here a satanic plot. Look at verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. And the Lord said unto Satan, Whence comest thou? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, From going to and fro in the earth and walking up and down in it. And the Lord said unto Satan, Hast thou considered my servant Job, that there's none like him in the earth, a perfect and an upright man, one that feareth God and escheweth evil? Then Satan answered the Lord and said, Doth Job fear God for naught? Hast thou not put an hedge about him and about his house and about all that he hath on every side? Thou hast blessed the work of his hands, and his substance is increased in the land. But put forth thine hand now, and touch all that he hath, and he will curse thee to thy face. And the Lord said unto Satan, Behold, all that he hath is in thy power. Only upon himself put not forth thine hand. So Satan went forth from the presence of the Lord. Any Christian with a spiritual testimony becomes a specific target. Friend, understand something. It's wonderful that you're being faithful tonight. It's wonderful that you're in church. It's wonderful that this past week you've tried to live for the Lord. But understand something. When you attempt to do those things for God, Satan is painting a big target on your back. We have an enemy. He's as a roaring lion. He walks about seeking whom he may devour. Paul said we're to take and put on the whole armor of God that we may be able to stand against the wiles of the devil. We wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities, against powers, against rulers of darkness, against spiritual wickedness in high places. We have an enemy. And whatever God is doing in your life, you can be sure the devil's trying to undo it. Whatever God is putting together in your life that's wholesome and right and decent and good, the devil is trying to unravel and undo. And he has multiple darts. He has darts that he loves to throw our way. Paul said in 2 Corinthians 11 and verse 3, I fear lest by any means, as the serpent beguiled Eve through his subtlety, so your minds should be corrupted from the simplicity that's in Christ. I find it interesting that Paul said that Satan through any means. The devil will use pride. The devil will use anxiety. The devil will use drugs. The devil will use immorality. The devil will use gossip. The devil will use worry. He'll use fear. He'll use anything he can to destroy us. But Job, this person of excellence, goes through several innings of the game of life. And he seems to be doing really well. And then suddenly, we see, secondly, a period of exasperation. You can just kind of see Satan sitting over on the sideline here. As Job is being commended by God, and God is listing all of these wonderful things about Job and commending him for his godliness and commending him for his family and commending him for his priorities. And God is giving us kind of a glimpse into this great man, and Satan's over there lighting darts. And we see Satan light that dart, that fiery dart, and he fires the dart of a loss of finances. Look at verse 14. And there came a messenger unto Job and said, The oxen were plowing and the asses feeding beside them. And the Sabeans fell upon them and took them away. Yea, they have slain the servants with the edge of the sword, and I only am escaped alone to tell thee. All of a sudden, in the midst of Job fearing God and eschewing evil and doing what's right and trying to have integrity and honesty with God, all of a sudden Satan fires the dart of a loss of finances. You know, financial security is pretty insecure. When it comes right down to it, what we have in the bank isn't much. That's why God said, if riches increase, set not thine heart upon them. He said, take heed, beware of covetousness, for a man's life consisteth not in the abundance of the things which he possesseth. When God evaluates our life, He doesn't see how many cars we have in the garage, or how many things we have in the backyard, or how much our house payment is, or what kind of neighborhood we live in. These things are but temporal. God says godliness with contentment is great gain. We brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. Having then food and raiment, let us therewith be content. For they that will be rich fall into many temptations and snares, and into many foolish and hurtful lusts, which drown men in destruction and perdition. For the love of money is the root of all evil, which while some coveted after, have erred from the faith, and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. The dart is fired at Job, a loss of finances. And then we see Job lighting another dart. And we see the loss of family. Look at verse 18. While he was yet speaking, there came also another and said, Thy sons and thy daughters were eating and drinking wine in the eldest brother's house. And behold, there came a great wind from the wilderness and smote the four corners of the house, and it fell upon the young men, and they are dead. And I only am escaped alone to tell thee. You know, nothing hurts quite as bad as the loss of family. Death, divorce, desertion, division, the dart, the fiery dart, a loss of finances, a loss of family. Then we see a loss of fitness. Look at chapter 2 and verse number 7. So went Satan forth from the presence of the Lord and smote Job with sore boils from the sole of his foot unto his crown. And he took him a potsherd to scrape himself withal, and he sat down among the ashes. Now Job's health is at risk. His health is in jeopardy. His body covered with these painful boils. Another dart. And the devil lights a fourth dart, the loss of fellowship. In verse number 9, then said his wife in chapter 2 unto him, Dost thou still retain thine integrity? Curse God and die. We go to chapters 4 and 5, and Job's friends begin to gather, and they come to his house, and they see him in this condition, the loss of his finances, the loss of his family, the loss of his health, and now they begin to accuse him of being backslidden and wrong with God, and they're saying, Job, you're being judged. God is angry with you. You've sinned in your heart. Satan will target the areas that mean the most to us. Be careful about the things that you consider your strength. Be careful about the things that you consider to be secure. Be careful about the things that you consider as surety. One night Jesus was talking to his disciples, and he said, All ye shall be offended because of me this night. And do you remember who spoke first? Peter. In verse 33 there of Matthew 26, Peter, as he was so often to do, said, Though all men should be offended because of thee, yet will I never be offended. Peter was pretty sure of himself. Peter thought, no, you said all men. No, Lord, you got that wrong. Not me. You see, Peter considered his strength to be his defense of the Lord Jesus Christ. But Jesus said, Verily I say unto you, that this night before the cock crow, thou shalt deny me thrice. And Peter in verse 35, he said, Though I should die with thee, yet will I never deny thee. That's pretty strong confidence. No doubts. Impossible, God. You got this one wrong, Jesus. You've never made a mistake, but you just made one. Not me. I'll never be offended. They'll kill me before I deny you. Be careful. about what you consider to be your strength. Because pride goeth before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Are you in one of those exasperating innings of your life right now? You ever watch a baseball game where the pitcher, boy, he's just sailing along? I mean, through about 5 or 6 innings, he's throwing a no-hitter, or he's giving up maybe a walk, but he's striking out 7, 8 guys. They can't hit the ball out of the infield, and then all of a sudden, that 7th inning or something, he can't find the plate. I mean, he just can't get anybody out. He's hitting guys with the pitch. He's putting guys on base with balls. He's giving up these chunk singles, and all of a sudden, somebody barrels one up and hits it out of the park, and it's like, what happened? And maybe you're in one of those innings right now. I mean, you were doing fine. You got saved, you began to come to church, you got baptized, you started tithing, you started going out soul winning, you started being a good testimony at work, you started trying to get your family to serve the Lord, and you started nurturing your kids in the admonition of the Lord, and you were doing great. And all of a sudden, maybe you've hit one of those innings. Maybe it's in your marriage, maybe it's in your ministry, maybe it's in your health, maybe it's in a job, maybe it's in your finances, maybe it's a relationship. And all of a sudden it just seems like you can't get Satan out. He just looms at the plate. And the game of life is on the line. What do? I'll tell you, what you do in that moment is going to determine whether we win or lose. And I want you to see what Job did. Thirdly, tonight we see the promise of execution. Turn to chapter 13 of Job. Job's going through all of these difficulties. I mean, all of a sudden, this game has turned. All of a sudden, all this success, all of this commendation, all of these good things in Job's life, the greatest man in the East, and all of a sudden, gone. He just is losing it all. So what does Job do? Look at chapter 13 and verse 13. He's responding now to these friends that have come to accuse him. And he says, hold your peace, let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will. Wherefore do I take my flesh in my teeth, and put my life in mine hand? Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. I will maintain my own ways before him. When the game was on the line for Job, when it just seemed like the bases are loaded, and I'm about to throw a pitch and get beat here, what does Job do? We see in Job's life a marvelous trust. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Listen, friends, the strength of your trust is never known in the calm. The strength of your trust is revealed in the storm. Unto thee, O Lord, do I lift up my soul. O my Lord, I trust in thee. Let me not be ashamed. Let not mine enemies triumph over me. What time I am afraid, I will trust in thee. My soul trusteth in thee. Yea, in the shadow of thy wings do I make my refuge until these calamities be overpast. I cry unto the Lord Most High, unto God that performeth all things for me. Thou keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed upon thee, because he trusteth in thee. We see a maintained trust in God, this marvelous trust that Job has, that God has not made a mistake, that God has not done me wrong. I'm going to keep trusting him, though he slay me. And then we see a maintained target. I love the end of verse 15. He says, I will maintain my own way before the Lord. You know what so often happens to us when trouble comes? When the boat gets rocked a little bit, and all of a sudden we're in a bit of turmoil, and all of a sudden that fiery dart comes, you know what we do? We quit. We throw the ball down. We head for the dugout. In the dugout, we begin to blame God. We begin to accuse Him of being unfair. We rationalize our spiritual apathy by His treatment of us. We begin to play the victim card. We get the pity party going. We feel that God isn't fair. We quit. But not Job. Job maintained his target. I'm going to maintain my way before the Lord. I don't know how many times I've heard people say on a Sunday morning as they've left church to their pastors. I've stood beside pastors at the door. People come out and they'll say, Pastor, we'd be here tonight, but we're kind of going through it right now. You know, I've often thought, when you're kind of going through it right now, it's a good time to go to church. But it's kind of our nature when we're going through a tough time, when things don't quite go right, when some problems come, we just want to hand the ball back to the manager. We just want to kind of walk off the mound. We kind of want to sneak into the dugout. We kind of want to just quit the game. But not Job. His trust remained in God. His target remained the same. I'm going to serve God. I'm going to trust Him. I'm going to serve Him for the rest of my life. Things didn't go well for Joseph. But Joseph maintained his way before the Lord, and God honored him. Things didn't go well for Daniel, but Daniel kept his trust in the Lord. He kept his target in view, and God honored Daniel for his faithfulness. Things didn't always go right for the Apostle Paul. Read 2 Corinthians 11. Read of the trials. Read of the difficulties. But Paul maintained his target. We have so many things to be thankful for, don't we? Amen. This pastor was reading his list about things he's thankful for here at Lancaster Baptist Church. I'm sure that you resonated with many of those things. You've thought some of those same things about your church. And as he was talking about, being thankful, your mind went to other areas perhaps of your life. Areas where God has blessed you, areas where God has used you, areas where God has just showered His blessings on your life. God's been really good to my wife and I. He's blessed us. We're thankful for His blessings. Thankful for my children. My boys in the ministry, serving the Lord. Thankful for my grandkids, 12 of them now. Thankful for their health. And it's always fun to hear when they call and say, I got saved, or I got baptized. It's fun to hear how God is using their life, and now they're graduated from high school and going out into life, and it's just fun to see God bless their lives. God's been good to us. Back in March, we had our 12th grandchild, our 6th boy. We finally caught up. We were down 6-2, but it's 6-6 now. Took a lot of fasting and prayer, but we got caught up. Logan. Logan was born with Down syndrome. So what now? God, come on. What's up with that? No. Not on your life. Let me tell you something, friend. We thank God for Logan. You mark my words. God will use Logan Matthew Goetsch in ways as a Down syndrome little boy that He will not even use me or you. No, don't you take the ball from me. I'm not walking off the mound. I'm not throwing in the towel. No, we're striking out the devil. He may seem invincible. He may snarl his lip. He may think he's got the game won. But friend, I like what Job said. Though he slay me, yet will I trust in him. Amen. I will maintain my ways before the Lord. Maybe you're having a rough inning tonight. Maybe you're going through a season. It seems like there just comes one power hitter after another to the plate. You're not sure what to throw anymore. Friend, don't quit. Don't quit. You take that ball that God has given you, and by the grace of God, you throw that strike, and you watch God, because greater is He that's in you than he that's in the world.